we go.
Yeah.
Wow.
What kind of gavel have you run?
I didn't hear that.
So that was a call to order for a board work session. Please do the roll for us.
Sure. Aldrich.
Here.
Bowerman. Christensen.
Here.
McKeon.
Here.
Peterson.
Here.
Tucker.
Here.
And Tomzek.
Here. And please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Number 3 on our agenda is We Are Shakopee Schools Good News items, and we had such a plethora of good news at our last meeting that it looks like we don't have anything that we're going to present at least tonight. So, consideration of agenda as presented. Can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Okay, so motion is Christie and second is Paul. First reading of policies. The committee, the policy committee had a meeting earlier this afternoon or just before this. Oh, we didn't vote on the agenda. I'm sorry. See, I know you got to get me on these things. You got to get me on these things. Okay. All those in favor of accepting the agenda as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Passes. All right. Thank you for reminding me. Policy committee met this afternoon, and Christy has some information to share with us on that.
So we reviewed several policies to take a stab at bringing some of these up to date. We have made some adjustments to the original agenda that was sent out. We removed some. We are going to be discussing or reviewing in general 614, which is the up here, testing plan and procedures for the district. You know, that basically is our what we're currently doing as a district. We just have never really formalized, approved the policy as a board to be our set standard. So that's basically what the first reading of that policy details. The next one that we reviewed and is in our first reading tonight will be 722 public data requests. This is something that we've been using the last couple of years from what I understand. It's a little bit more detailed as to what it does, how we deal with data requests from the community, the news media, etc. And what this will do is replace an existing policy of policy 909, which is our, it was basically just a Shakopee guideline. It was not an MSBA policy, which 909 is a news media relations policy. And then the other one is 533. That's the only one that's left. And I'm going to ask Mike to talk about that because he's done some significant work and made some recommendations to bring this policy to a first reading. So.
Policy 533 is a wellness policy, and it's a long and it's a detailed policy. Ultimately, our goal is to, we want our schools to be safe environments. We want them to be healthy environments for students and for the adults who work there. We live in an interesting time. I've been in education for quite a while, and I would say over the last 5 to 10 years, there's been far more in the way of contentiousness around food in schools than at any time previous to that. And so what we've done is we've taken a look at policy 533 and where the law and the USDA rules for what are competitive foods, in other words, the foods that are part of the school lunch program. Those we're following the explicit rules, as we always do, and our food service department does a fantastic job of doing that. In some of the others, what we've done is taken a prudent approach where sometimes it talks about eliminating we've changed words and said, you know what, we're going to reduce. And we think there's a process that you can't go from, you know, it's not all or none. It's talking about taking steps in the right direction. One example would be, you know, the use of food as rewards in different activities or classrooms. You know, that we want to see a reduction in that. We want people to think creatively about what other forms of reward can you use. But we certainly get that, you know, you win a big volleyball game at a region tournament, you might want to stop for pizza on the way back, and that seems an appropriate, you know, use of food in that to kind of celebrate and do that. So we want to be real clear that, you know, we're taking steps to improve and encourage healthy habits, healthy food habits, but that we also, you know, we want to be prudent, we want to be moderate, we want to be, you know, looking at this over time. And so this is an attempt by us with the first reading of policy to get this on the table and continue a discussion, which may go for a few weeks, may go for a few months, that we want to make sure that we're on board, and that we're also giving guidance to the folks who are leading our school buildings and providing those services, so we can all be in sync in terms of what does it really mean to be encouraging healthier food habits. So.
And for board members, as you go through these policies that we just talked about a little bit here, if you have concerns or questions about it, then you can contact anybody who's on the committee, and it'll be brought up at the next meeting. Makes sense?
Yeah, would it be okay if I added two more things?
Sure.
Just for clarity from the original agenda, we're going to hold over policies 617, 620, and 624 to a later meeting, that we're still doing more research. And then one other first reading would be the deletion of that policy 909, just to be clear. I know it was mentioned that that's in essence replaced by policy 722.
And actually, for those who are on the board prior to January, we did have 722 before the board once before, and there were a lot of questions about whether or not we were required to create information that we didn't currently have. Upon request, do we need to create it? And MSBA came back with the decision that we don't need to create something new. All right. Numbers, yes.
Just to clarify though, we can offer to create it for reasonable administrative fees, right?
I think if we have the data and there's a cost to producing the data, that we're within our rights to charge for that.
Right.
But if we currently don't have the data, don't produce the data, we're not going to do so. That's just not. It's really what the spirit of this policy and the laws that support this. If you have the data, and we've got lots and lots of data, that we will always produce that. If there's a cost in producing that we can charge for that. If we don't have the data, and it's not something we regularly collect or routinely collect or do, then our answer would be no, that we're not going to do that as a matter of rule and practice.
Okay.
Okay.
Just one thing.
Some of that also, just to be clear as well, it's how it's combined as well.
Correct.
Like, we wouldn't take something and aggregate things and create it if it's not something we do in the normal course of business, beyond whether we just even collected data or not.
Yep.
And we wouldn't want to selectively say we would create information that could get very burdensome, and it could be an equity or fairness issue if we're going to do that.
That's a great point.
Okay, number 6, discussion of a benchmark survey. He's going to tell us about that.
Yep.
Okay.
I was just thinking, I was trying to think now.
What is that again?
Boy, we kind of read you for a lot, didn't we? Did we approve the first reading typically?
No,
I didn't.
You're good? Yeah, and everybody does that a little bit differently. I've been in places that do and some that don't, so perfect. Benchmark survey, this is kind of an FYI. Ashley McCray, our communications department, and I have been doing some research in regards to some type of benchmark survey, and We've looked at some formats, looked at things. This is a heads up that we do plan to bring something to the board. The idea, we want to get information from our community. We'd like feedback from our community in terms of how are we doing? And how are we doing in terms of providing the services, in terms of educating students, in terms of meeting the needs of the community, with the thought being that would be really good information to have in the near term, immediate uses. We always want that type of constructive feedback, but then also to begin and do it in such a way that it's something we can do longitudinally and collect the same data over time in the same manner, the same, trying to have some science in the surveying, randomization and all those things. So there's validity in comparing the data from year to year over a period of time to inform, are we improving there? Are we not improving as quickly? Are we moving in the other direction? Again, basically to inform ourselves and how we're doing and help us to work to get better, all in the spirit of continuous improvement. So, if there's anything to add, Ashley or Dave?
Nope, that pretty much sums it up.
Questions? I love it. I like the idea. I think that it's something that we've been lacking for some time.
I especially like the longitudinal idea. And I think to continue to ask the same questions over time gives us important information.
Kind of a logical way to set and raise the bar.
Absolutely.
Yeah, all feedback's a gift. So the more we can get feedback, the better off we all are.
Eric.
Okay, number 7, discussion and possible action. We don't have anything there, so we'll move on to 8. This is informational. I'm really excited about this. I think this is a great move. Yeah, you gotta love this. A new partnership between Shakopee Public Schools and Scott County Library. Students will receive a fine-free virtual library account that will provide access to digital resources from Scott County Library System and allow for checkout of 2 physical items. And we have actually 2 presenters here tonight. So,
Brian?
I'm Sandy. I'm the media specialist at the high school and 2 middle schools.
So while Sandy's connecting to the screens, I'm going to tee it up a little bit. So way back in, well, at least fall of 2014, maybe earlier, but that's as far back as the notes I have go, there was discussion amongst the media specialists in the district about establishing some kind of partnership with the local library to allow students to have essentially a youth welcome card, which you can go to a library and any parent can get for their child, and would allow them to access the library resources. And in particular, the local library has a wealth of digital tools and online resources. We'll get into a few of those and show you some samples. There's been a lot of people over the years that have worked on this project, and there were various hurdles, but at the end of the day, the biggest one was just working out how to make our system, Infinite Campus, our student database, talk to the system at the library called Cersei Dynix, which is a very, unless you work in library sciences, you don't know what that is. It's very much a system unto its environment. And it's been around forever. So we finally got over that hurdle of making them talk to each other, and that allowed us to go into this project. And Sandy's going to get into the meat of it because she's more of the content expert on these things.
So we have several goals for this partnership, and one of them is to increase student access to public library resources that support lifelong learning and reading. And so we see this partnership helping students where they are currently in school, but we also see it helping students as they leave us and possibly as they become parents themselves, and being able to carry over those skills of using public library resources is really important. So that's one of our goals. We also want to foster school success and reinforce the use of digital tools for research and growth. And of course, we want to give students more voice and choice in their reading materials, because research tells us that that is so important. I don't think we could go through all the resources that we would gain through this, but there's one that I want to highlight first. Homework Help Now is an online homework assistance program. Students get one-on-one tutoring from expert tutors and teachers. It's from 1 to 11 p.m., 7 days a week. They have Spanish-speaking tutors, and they tutor any grade, any subject area. They have test prep, EL, skill builders, all the prep for different AP classes. So I think this would be a huge benefit for students. And I think about students where maybe English isn't spoken at home, or where students don't have parents that have taken the classes they've taken. So that's one of the resources we're excited about. Another resource we're excited about is the Cloud Library, where students can access ebooks and audiobooks. And we currently use Mac and VIA for our digital platform, and we have a really strong collection. But just being able to offer more choices to students is really exciting.
So would the students have to access that cloud library just using an iOS device, or would they be able to access it with a Windows device?
They could access it with any sort of device that has internet.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we also gain all the online subscription databases that the public library pays for. And being able to be a savvy user of databases is such an important skill as you go into college level research. And we already use databases at high school, and I do a lot of teaching in classes with that, but just being able to expand those options would be really exciting. And the other ones on the list, we'll just kind of let you take a look at on your own time.
So the key to all this, and if you've got your own library card and you've ever logged into any of the online resources, you know that they're asking you to input a library card number and input a PIN. So every student will have that, and that's sort of the gateway to entry, so to speak, for all the online resources. They've always been there, but unless you had that library card, you couldn't get to it. So there's notes in here that kind of talk through just the logistics of how we're putting that together, what the library card number looks like. A key aspect of this, and this will be a big part of the communication and just making sure everyone's aware, like this is the reality of public library access, is that unlike a school, which by default has filtering or has some sort of content regulation, a public library doesn't. It can't. By law, it can't filter. So anyone, even any child with a youth card, could technically check out anything from the collection, anything from the library's catalog. And we need to communicate that, and that will be part of the communication that goes out to parents, and they'll have the option to choose to opt out to their child. Not expecting a lot of people to do that, but they will have the opportunity to do so.
Will parents be able to know what their child is checking out or school at all?
There's not like an oversight type of, and that's by design. Even the library will say they're very big on, individual privacy is very tight and very respected, even at the youth level, what they, how they manage that.
So how will it work if a student already has a library card? Will that then expire and this will be their new one?
This will not replace. This sort of stands off on its own. That was one of the things we worked out along the way in terms of just the data and the logistics. Was it was easier to kind of keep it as its own separate thing. And the library is okay with that. They know that there's going to be some redundancy, but for a management perspective, for them, it's easier just to have it sort of in its own bucket. And then that way we can manage, like we put, one of the fields we bring in is their graduation year. So we know, okay, once they're 18, presumably that card will expire that summer.
At that point, they can go get a standard issue card if they don't have one already, and they've said they're completely comfortable with students using either card.
And what about staff, teachers? Will they have the same access, or will they just?
We can't do it for teachers because there's some strictness to keeping it within residency of the county. We're kind of stretching it a little bit even with our student body because there are some kids that are not in Scott County, right? And there's a little bit of drift and some open enrollees. They're kind of letting that slide, but they can't extend that to staff. I think, you have a lot of staff that are either residents.
And as a
around
staff
here at
member,
our
even if
libraries.
you're not a resident, you can have an educator account. So just the main difference will be like with the student account, their number will be 720 followed by their ID number. So it'll be really easy for them to call up and easy for teachers to show them how to use it. So the staff might have their own educator account, it just won't be that easy number like that.
Okay.
I forgot they could go.
Now, say there's a developmentally delayed student who graduates high school but goes on to the transition program, would they still be eligible for this?
Once they turn 18, they could get just a regular library card. So
Okay.
yeah. It could get a little tricky to manage individual situations like that. And again, at that point, they could go out and get their own.
And so students won't actually have a physical card, they'll just have that number. But I think what I really like about this is I think it's a win for equity because it takes away that necessary step of having to go into a library branch and set up your little youth welcome card account.
You want to talk about rollout?
So we've been working on this for so long, it feels funny that we're actually finally here. But we're planning on doing a soft rollout in May with a pilot group, and our pilot group will be next year's 9th through 12th graders. And so I'll be presenting with Lisa Pollard from the public library at the staff meeting in May, and it will just be to tell teachers about the partnership so that they can promote it to students in advance of summer so that students can access those resources over the summer. We'll also be sending out an informational letter to parents that has an FAQ, like questions kind of like what you've been asking, and then an opt-out form. And we have the informational letter linked in the presentation. It's in draft form right now. We have a few little tweaks we need to make, but you're welcome to take a look at what we have so far. And then, of course, we'll publicize on the school website, the Scott County Public Library website, and once we're ready to do our hard rollout, or I guess our official launch in the fall, we'll be working with our communications department to figure out how we can use Shakopee channels of communication to really get the word out. Because I think this will be more powerful if we really publicize and promote it. Okay, and then, as I was saying, our official launch will be in the fall, and that's when we'll extend that partnership down to the middle school level. And we'll do similar things like presentations at staff meetings, the informational letter to the middle school parents. And I'll also be doing some kind of smaller targeted training with groups of teachers from 6 through 12, just because with the public library resources, there's so many of them that certain ones appeal to different disciplines. So really working with the disciplines and figuring out what they could really maximize. I'll be in classes, particularly AVID, EL, freshman seminar classes, to roll it out to students. And we're thinking the fall would be a good time to do a press release, just because the start of school is so fresh in people's minds. So it might be good to wait till fall for that. And then I'll also meet with different groups like cultural liaisons, equity specialists, paraeducators, and the Welcome Center staff, just so that they're familiar with the partnership and know how to comfortably talk about it with parents and students so that they're able to use it.
So you had said earlier that the soft rollout is going to be for next year's 9 through 12. So you'll go to the middle schools to talk with 8th grade.
Mm-hmm. Yep, so for the rollout that will happen over the summer, that will just be current 9 through 12 graders. So we'll be sending out that information letter, and I believe students will get like an activation email.
That's part of the reason we want to give the students a heads up, is once we send the file over to generate the account, it kicks off like an email to their student ID at shakopeeschools.org, their Google account, and They just have to go through a setup step to set their PIN so that they have account security and, yeah.
And we wanted to do that soft rollout just so that students get access to resources over the summer. We know that our ebooks and audiobooks get checked out quite a bit over the summer because the students don't have access to our physical collection. But just being able to access the public library resources, both digital and print, we think would be really helpful.
And students can get books, novels, whatever, without necessarily having an e-reader. It can be downloaded to their
Exactly. Right, they don't need to have like a Kindle or a Nook. They can just download the free app, the Cloud Library app.
Would this be something that, either a presentation or some sort of a handout for open house at the middle schools in the fall,
Definitely.
August?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And then our final stage of the rollout will be next spring, where we extend it down to the elementary level. And at that point, Katie Bone, our elementary media specialist, will kind of take the reins on the publicity and the training for the elementary schools. And we'll be doing similar types of promotion there too.
So,
and I have another question. This, you might not even know the answer to this, but the homework help
Yeah.
is actually live help, not virtual help?
It's live, like right now, say I was in 10th grade and I was looking for a tutor in geometry. I could get live help. And then what's kind of nice is it's one-on-one tutoring. You have a board that you work with. And I actually won't, I'm not going to connect because I don't want to waste their resources. But see, someone responded right away. And you can save your boards so that you can go back later and then review what they talked to you about.
Wow.
Yeah. I think this is probably the resource that I'm the most excited about.
Parents should be excited.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think about if my daughter ever takes calculus, then calculus, you know?
Oh.
Yeah. So I think this could be really helpful for students. Yeah.
Very nice.
So I think for me, the librarian in me is very excited about all the resources, but I'm also really excited that everyone will be able to get access so easily.
How would the kindergarten, first graders, and those that don't have their own iPads access this?
well, in school next year, 1st through 5th will be one-to-one, and then kindergarten will be one-to-one the following year. So we're moving toward that, where they're all have an assigned device. We're still not at the point where we're sending devices home for elementary.
That's why I'm asking.
There's more, it's getting, there's been discussion, but we haven't landed on a timeline or a decision for that yet. But within school, and so I think outside of school, if they had a device, outside they could get on. In school, I think one of the things we want to build with the staff is an understanding of what's available to them, what they can rely on in terms of library resources that they could use during the regular school day. I think that's sort of we didn't really stress that part, but it's a component of this where we want to build it up gradually enough where people come to see it as, okay, this is as viable a resource as anything that we have internally, and start to look at it that way and utilize it during the school day.
So for example,
That's going to reinforce the argument of maybe
Yeah.
eventually allowing devices to go home for K-5 or gradually stuffing that down, but that's there's things still to work out with that.
Yeah, so like for example, we have, through the Electronic Library of Minnesota, we have a handful of really good databases that we teach in classes. And I think it's probably a list of 10, but through the public library, I think I have no idea how many databases they have, but if I just click on one subject, health and medicine, you can see all the databases that they pay for, and we would never be able to afford that many databases. So like Brian was saying, like really working with those targeted groups of teachers to show them what they can use with their classes is something that we'll really be working on. And to your question, any device that you have at home, students can use with this account.
So the intention is to share with parents the access information.
Yes.
And is there any thought to add in all the worst?
Oh, we hadn't considered it, but I know that there are some resources like BookFlix and Tumble books that would be really good for pre-K and that early literacy. So we hadn't considered that, but that's definitely something we can look at.
Is there any limitation of how many times a student can use that homework help now app?
No, there's not. We had this actually at my previous district. They had something really similar, and I think it might have been the same company that it's just going to change names. But no, you can use it whenever. And they have, let's see here. They have, I guess I don't have it up anymore, but they have AP test prep and ACT prep, ASVAB test prep. So a lot of different resources aside from the live tutoring too.
So, a couple other tidbits I'll mention. If you're looking for like a similar program to look at as a model, St. Paul Public Schools and the St. Paul Library have a program called Library Go that's pretty well publicized and very well documented, and that's I think we've looked at that a few times as a model for some of the things that we're doing in terms of timeline communications.
It
So that's
seems
a good
like a lot
reference
of
point.
districts have been modeling off that. I think Dakota County, they're partnering with the districts that are part of their county too, so they have this up and running. And then also Hennepin County Libraries is partnering with Hopkins, and they have Power Up Libraries. So those are just a couple other programs that are up and running that you could take a look at too, and that's kind of what we've been basing our work off of.
The other thing I would say is that the library, the public library, is very much pushing for this as well. You know, it looks like it's all a win for us, but for them, there's certain resources that they consider underutilized, like the homework hotline group. Jake Rusting, the director over there, is like, if we can get more people using that, that's great, because then it sort of justifies that expense from their point of view and kind of makes it easier sell because they have the same taxpayer base to account to as we do. So, so they're very much, it's very much a collaborative and a win-win kind of effort. So.
I just, oh, go ahead.
I thought you were going to say the exact same thing. Okay. Are there any databases that we're currently paying for that they have that we might be able to get something different, or it could be the same as or something like that?
The one that we currently subscribe to is Facts on File, Issues and Controversies. And I think it's about $650 per middle school and $1,200 at the high school. So they pay for that database. So my plan is to not pay for it if we have access to it through the public library. And then we can spend that money in other places.
Awesome.
And all this stuff is available to everybody right now. This is just making it easier.
It's making it easier. It's taking away that step of having to go into the public library to set up an account. Because not all students are able to do that. So it's just really making sure that everyone can access those resources. I really do think it's an equity thing.
And last question, would we be able to tell how many kids access through our, like, they use their 0720 virtual as some idea it's working?
I feel like we asked that question. I'm not sure if we had. We might be able to. I feel like we asked Christy that about whether there was.
It's good no matter what
logistics
the
we
number
could-
is. 'cause
Right.
there's-
I would
there's
think
a
we
cost.
would be able to.
Yeah.
I feel like we can. We just, once we
Some people
get
really
a little
like
bit of
data.
usage, we
More than they can get their hands on.
Right.
How's the data add on?
I know for the subscriptions that we pay for, we have pretty specific usage data. And so I would assume that for this, like this databases that they pay for, they would also have that data. And we might not be able to break it down by, different populations, but I think if you saw a spike in
Sure.
that homework help after we launched this program, I think you could probably
Sure.
infer as much of that.
I just wanted to applaud the effort. This is one of those where it's a great idea, But really, the great idea is about 1% of the equation. The other 99% of the equation was literally tens, hundreds, years of hours of working together and doing something that's just a great idea and bringing it to fruition. And so I applaud the effort of, Brian and of our media specialists and of the county folks to get systems that talk together. And this is, I think this is a really exciting thing for our students. And I'm excited for the soft launch in May, and then the more formal rollout next fall, and then into the spring for the younger kids. So I just want to say thank you for, I know you've done just a ton of work on this, and so greatly appreciate the effort.
Yes, bravo, we're all thankful, so thank you very much. And thank you for coming here to speak with us tonight. Are we good? Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for coming. And so we move on to 8.2, Facilities Task Force, and we gave Mike all the assignments tonight.
Sarah will pull that up, but this is just coming back and sharing that the Facilities Task Force is set up and ready to go. The task force will examine the use of existing space in the district, and then eventually later in the year share recommendations with the Facilities Committee and the board in terms of how to best use that existing space. And so there's a framework on the projector here for deliverables. There's a self-nominating process which kicks off tomorrow. And looking at the task force, will have a total of 18 participants, 6 community members or parents, 4 teachers, 1 from early childhood, 1 from elementary, 1 from the middle level, and 1 from high school, 2 staff members, 3 school board members, a district level administrator, a building administrator, the building and grounds manager, and the committee facilitator will be Scott McQueen from Wold Architects and Engineers, who's done a fantastic job of facilitating other task force and similar committees in our district, and others will be available as resources. Like I said, I mentioned earlier, there's a projected schedule of activities. The self-nominating or self-nomination application window will open is it later this evening or tomorrow morning, Sarah?
I think can we pull it out yet tonight? Whatever you want.
All
I
right.
think we can.
It will open later this evening and run through April 26th. The kickoff meeting for this task force will be May 15th at 6 p.m. There's a meeting in July, a meeting in August, and then a series of fall meetings. And again, the idea is taking a look at existing space within the district, and that is the scope for this particular task force, and so that we can make the most efficient and best use of the space that we currently have in the district. With that, I'd throw it out. Some of you have been involved in parts of this, or if you have questions or other pieces, but we'll have an online application, right, located via the school district website, and also if somebody wanted to come into the district office, they could get a pencil and paper version as well.
Right, absolutely. There'll be a link that a user can go in and complete an online application, Google application that we'll receive electronically, or the version that you see here that's projected at the moment would be a hard copy that they could download, pick up. We could email all of the options to get that to them.
Perfect. And the deadline for that is April 26th, correct?
Yeah.
So we'd love to have members that, members of the community and others, step forward and join this particular task force. And we look forward to hearing from the group in terms of their research and what they discover and find in regards to the use of existing space.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
The date of 26th, we have a facilities committee meeting on the 24th. Did we discuss reviewing the applicants at that meeting, or did I totally hear that wrong?
You had the same question I did.
Because we don't have another facilities meeting before the May 15th kickoff meeting. So my question, I guess, is that date correct? And if it is correct, when would we be reviewing the applications?
Particularly because they have to be blinded,
Right, right.
with the name on.
Anonymous.
The thought, at least my memory is, the thought is that there is a May 6th meeting, work session scheduled. So the time between when it's closing, you have that whole next week for either the facilities committee to review, or if, I'm not clear honestly if it's a full board review. And then a selection, could be, a recommendation for selection could be brought forward to the board on the 6th.
And I guess my understanding was it was going to be a subcommittee from that facilities committee.
There you go.
And that would make a proposal at the
Perfect.
May 6th board work session.
Yeah, so can we end it on the 22nd so that that can happen on that evening?
Well, if it's a subcommittee, we could meet.
Right, but we're already meeting that night, so why not just do it then when we're all.
But if it's a I see what you're pointing
Yeah,
out.
we certainly could, if you felt that would work better. I think that's one of the reasons we're presenting this,
Yeah.
is to kind of put the final touches and get the different voices in the room.
Or is the other option to schedule a facilities meeting, committee meeting early the next week? Is that?
The following week, I think it would be a subcommittee of that facilities.
So maybe on the
Would it be the three
24th,
of
we
us?
could figure out who wanted to be on that committee, and then that subcommittee, that ad hoc committee would meet.
I'm trying to, wouldn't it just, I thought it was the facilities committee was going to make that determination.
That was
That
my
makes the most
understanding.
sense.
So the whole committee, you're saying, would look at that?
Yeah, with some administrators like Mike and Dave and.
And we certainly
Sure, yeah.
can, and that's, we would then probably have to cut the applications off at, I don't know, 4 PM on the 22nd.
3 o'clock maybe,
Yeah.
3 or 4, something like that on the 22nd.
I think that's the most efficient use of time. I mean,
Yep.
if we don't have enough applicants, by then we can look at alternatives, but
No, I think that's a good point.
it would be my preference.
Do we want the whole facilities committee? The more people you have involved, the
Well, I don't think we need to have the vendors involved in that conversation. I think it would probably just be the three of us and then Mike and Dave and Ed maybe.
Yep.
And we review them without names on them, is that
Right.
correct?
Right.
So you need a little bit of time
Right.
to assemble that?
So I was thinking 3 would probably be fine. I can start to prep earlier on the ones that we've received.
And will you, like we've done in the past, send them out as if you receive one tomorrow, you can send it out anonymously to me?
I know the board's preference.
That would be my preference, so we have time to review. them.
Sure. Might be the easiest.
Help crunch time then.
Yeah.
You have time to evaluate.
So that would be anonymous then too, right? I just want to make sure. I'm-
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yep.
Applicant
Sure,
1,
yes.
2, 3, 4.
Okay, perfect.
And then would that, I heard you say district website, would you put it on the quick links on each school's site?
We would usually, what we did for attendance areas, it would just be on the home page of our main website, and then under quick links on our website, on the home page.
Only on the district site?
The home page of the district site. So not on the individual school websites. But if you want that, it's fine. It's your preference.
My personal preference would be to put it on all of them. But
More areas people can
All right.
see where it's
Actually
at.
hear about it, you know.
Yep,
yeah.
social
Right.
media, all of the home pages, I think the more that we publicize it, the
Yep.
better we will.
More legitimate.
Yep, better off we'll be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then, Sarah, the deadline, did you say 3 PM?
If we could go at
On the
3
22nd.
3
Perfect.
o'clock on the 22nd, if that works for the board, I'd appreciate that.
Yep.
Yep, that's good. We'll do that then.
On the 22nd or the 24th, sorry?
Well, on the 22nd, so there's 2 days to
Oh.
make sure everything's ready for the committee meeting is on the 24th.
Okay,
Yep.
sorry.
Nope.
Oh, wait a
Okay,
minute,
so-
wait a minute.
Can we go over the dates?
That kind of messed us up.
So I think what we're saying is, well, at least what I was saying was April 8th through the 24th. If that gives,
I'm comfortable with that.
If you're gonna be sending them as you receive them, then the 24th is probably
Yes.
sufficient.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm comfortable, me personally, I'm comfortable with the 24th at 3.
Perfect. No, that's good.
That works for you guys.
A little more time in there for.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that.
Good.
Okay.
and yes, if we could all share this on social media, it's,
Yeah. And I know the communications department has a plan to
Oh,
get
yeah,
this
we
out
have to
to
cover it.
everybody, so.
yeah, she's already doing it
So,
now.
yeah. So the only,
Multitasking.
I'm sorry, can I ask a question?
Yes.
So the only two dates that are changing are the self-nomination application window and the deadline.
Yes,
Yep.
yeah.
Okay, so the application window is the 8th through the 24th,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the deadline is
At 3.
April 24th at 3 p.m.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, everybody good with that? What other questions are there?
Sorry?
We should probably move on from that one
Hold on, it's
before we
okay.
get any more confused.
No, that's good.
I was gonna say, we're getting an hour and a half till game.
No, that was good.
No, I was just thinking it was you.
Yeah.
No, I'm excited to get this going. I think that this is going to help us tremendously with understanding what we have and where we need to go. And I think there'll be a lot of interest. I'm hoping we will have a lot of interest.
So as,
Interesting to see.
yeah,
Yeah.
so as we kind of outlined, the facilities committee will review this with Mike, Dave, Ed, and try and winnow it down to the number of slots that we have, right? And then we'll bring it back to the board for a recommendation, and then that'll be a pretty quick turnaround. Because it's Monday, the meeting is, I think, the following Monday or following Tuesday. I guess this is the opportunity for the other board members not part of that conversation to give it, if you have any thoughts on, you know, we will be seeing them blind, we won't know the names, so we won't be able to say, you know, is this your first volunteer experience? Well, I guess it's.
It's in the application.
Yeah,
Right.
but if anybody has any preferences about people they lean, or not, you know, people, but types of candidates, I'd certainly like to hear it, and others, you know, want to make sure we're inclusive of everybody's voice. So, any thoughts?
I would just say we'd like to see a good balance of some experience and some new, not all experience,
Right.
experience in different communities.
Sometimes we have the same 7 people on 4 different committees because they're passionate volunteers.
Yes.
New people have different ideas,
Yeah.
And different,
perspective.
you know, just good balance between all the questions that have been asked, I would say.
And if we have some new people who get involved, the sooner new people get involved in our school district, the better for all of our students.
A balance between people who've lived here a long time and haven't lived here a long time.
Yep.
Great point.
They can be bringing some good best practices in from wherever it is they moved from.
Yep. Other thoughts?
I just think we're at the mercy of who applies.
Yeah,
We could
that's,
have 20 people that have lived here 20 plus years, and then we could have nobody that's new. I mean,
in 2014, when the task force that you were eventually on, we didn't know if we'd fill 30 slots, and we wound up with 95 to start, so it was a wonderful thing. Now, we're not talking about that big of an effort, but it's, you know, we'll see. We could get 4 people volunteer, or we could get 30. So, thank you. Sorry, I just want to make sure.
No, that's great, and I hear everybody here saying, and we absolutely believe in it. We want a variety of voices, we want, you know, folks who look at things from a variety of different perspectives, and want it to be a truly collaborative task force, and look at the issue of use of space from multiple perspectives, and so that's, hopefully we'll get folks that are willing to spend some time working on that project and take the time to apply. And again, I thank those that are considering that, or, you know, encourage them to do it, and thank them for giving us that type of consideration and stepping out and volunteering. So.
Right, I think we're good.
Yep.
All right, number 9 is an action item, It's for consideration to approve a proposal to change the closing date for land purchase agreement with Trident Development LLC. I need a motion for us to consider it.
Some motion.
Second.
So Joe and Matt for the second, and another assignment.
Yeah, these are the things that happen in very often when companies are trying to develop land, and so nothing really out of the ordinary, other than we have, what we're looking to do is update a purchase agreement that the district currently has with Trident Development LLC, and it would be for the property over on Lusitano Street. And just due to some, kind of normal planning things that go on with other parts of government, the city, Met Council and that, as they're working on their comprehensive plans and other development plans. The developer, Trident, would like those entities to have their planning in more of a complete state, which would help them then to know exactly what they're getting into to develop this particular property. And so I've been in contact with Jim Conway, who's our attorney, who's worked on this, worked on the original agreement, went through a variety of possibilities. We've communicated with the folks at Trident, and in what I would consider a goodwill gesture that, we're in this together. We fully believe this purchase will be actualized, just at a slightly later date than was previously planned. They've agreed to pay an additional $10,000 in earnest money. And so we're moving deadlines. The new closing day would be December 31st, 2019. And so we're moving deadlines a little bit further out. And so there's a sample, a draft of what that purchase agreement that would clarify the dates and clarify that additional $10,000. And we have agreed in principle, that some things were supposed to have been done by March 31st, but we said, no, we need to bring it before the board. Wanted to give you a chance to, as a full board, hear this change to this purchase agreement, or a second amendment to this purchase agreement, and ask any questions prior to approving.
So what this does is, it's money that we were going to put in the bank. We had it as reserved, restricted, non-spendable anyways. But when our audit comes up this fall, we will be $1.1 million less in our fund. So, but it's not like it's going away. We're not losing the money. We didn't have plans to spend it. It just doesn't make the numbers look as good at the end of the year.
Correct. If you remember Jeff Priest, our director of finance, our business manager, he talked about what our fund balance would be at the end of fiscal year 19, our current school year, our current fiscal year, which ends June 30th. That the idea would be that this purchase agreement would have occurred previously under the original agreement prior to the end of the fiscal 19 year. And so we would have added $1.1 million to our fund balance in fiscal 19. That same amount of money will still be added to the fund balance, but it won't happen until the December 31st closing date, meaning that $1.1 million will be added to the fund balance in fiscal 20. In essence, if you looked at our financial picture over 2 years, at the end of fiscal 20, it will look exactly the same as we had projected at previous meetings, understanding that money that was going to enter into the fund balance prior to the end of this fiscal year will now enter in the next year. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, it's those decisions that we, this to me, it seems like a no-brainer. It's still a good faith effort. It's still, everything's on track. It's going to happen. But if we don't call out that this is going to be a change at the end of the year, it's very easy for people, wait, where's that 1.1 we were counting on?
Yep.
And
I know that when Jeff does his budget update, his monthly one at our April 22nd board meeting, he will discuss it again and do it more eloquently and specifically than I just did. But
do we have a timetable what these other entities would be maybe getting their
these
Issues
elements we're
resolved
looking
that.
for.
Yeah, I don't have the specifics. If we scroll down a little bit, very confident that it'll be wrapped up by the fall. And we've got the extension of condition date, which was March 31st, is now November 15th. And some of those things are just unforeseen, and you're just waiting for other folks to hold good discussions and do their planning work thoroughly. And so there's nothing untoward. It's just couldn't have been well predicted, much before it happened.
But say the city, the county, Med Council, whoever
Yep.
decides we're not going to let them do what they want with this property, or suddenly putting it back on the market.
Well, no, and I asked those questions of Jim Conley and folks that have been involved. We have a high level of confidence that this purchase will be completed December 31st. I'm not going to guarantee that. Things can change, but I believe that to be the case, and that we believe that we've built in a cushion even in terms of time. But we are also reliant on other entities to do their planning. But yeah, I don't foresee this as being, and I think we moved it once already. I don't foresee this as them being the second in a series of steps. I think there's a much higher probability that this is the second and final step. But again, I'm not going to guarantee that. But we did, and I asked those same questions of Jim and of the folks from Trident, and we reasonably expect that.
But I mean, does Trident have an escape clause if?
We've had that conversation. That was them adding the earnest money. I think it's a sign of good faith, and that they're fully committed to the purchase and want the project to go through. And I have every reason to believe that that's true. So.
Okay.
You know how much earnest money we have right now?
15,000, so it goes up to 25,000.
And the good news is it doesn't cost us anything to hold it, right? We're not taxed on it. So we get to hold it. And if the sale were to not go through, the assets had now essentially 2 years to appreciate. And last I saw, land values are going up pretty quick. So, we fully intend to honor this agreement, right? If it were to go back on the market, it might be a bigger price tag at that point in time.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah. And then the other one that just popped into my head in asking these questions would be anybody else who, let's say we didn't take this action and we just kind of, left it. Anybody else who wanted to develop that land, they would be waiting on the same other planning done by other entities too. So they would be hesitant to jump on board. So we would be in the same position, if you will. But no, I felt the high level of confidence that everything's above board. We had great conversations. Bless you. And that everybody's doing things in good faith, and we reached an agreement. We have an obligation. I think when we're doing things in good faith with other folks, that we honor that agreement, and I believe that that's a reciprocal understanding in this particular agreement. So.
And one of the owners of Trident is a local person who's been very involved in developing. This isn't a fly-by-night organization from out of town. It's
a great point.
There's a long-standing relationship.
It's not the roof groups?
No.
Nope.
So I will make a motion to approve the proposal.
We already have the motion in a second.
Oh,
Yeah,
we
so
do?
now we do a vote,
Oh,
right?
okay.
I
I
think
missed
that-
that. We've been talking about it so long, I totally.
Long discussion. I blame that on
I
me.
spaced it too, Christie.
Yeah.
All right, so all those who are in favor of approving a proposal to change the closing date for land purchase agreement with Trident Development LLC signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Aye.
Sorry.
Yes, and aye.
Aye, okay. Those opposed? It passes. So, all right, we'll start this way.
I have nothing to say, but congratulations on your first
Stumbling through it?
stumbling through it. You did a good job. Kept everything moving. You knew what you were doing, so good job.
All right. You're next, Paul.
Really don't have a whole lot to say other than kudos on getting to the finish line. It's going to get easier going forward now, so.
All right, Dave.
I mentioned this earlier, tomorrow at our high school is that they're doing their MCA testing in mass, so this will be the second year we're doing it this way, where we're going to have 1,000, 1,100 kids, or even maybe 1,200 testing at once, 10th grade reading and 11th grade math. And I understand our 9th graders,
Yeah.
they are going to
Field
college
trip.
visits.
All 9th graders, so it's exciting. That's a new flip with the academy approach in the freshman seminar. All 9th graders are on a visit, college visit. It's pretty cool.
And so are they going to various colleges?
Right.
Wow. All of
They
them?
had an opportunity to, and I think there were more dates too.
Goodness.
More levels, you know, a trade and a, you know, different size of schools. They had some selection there.
Private.
Yeah, yeah. So they could make some selections, and I believe there's at least one more date yet this year. So it's
That's
exciting.
impressive. Very cool.
All
That's
ninth
cool.
graders.
Good work.
And then one other good news item that might be, I don't know all the details on this, maybe somebody else here does. One of the Destination Imagination teams is going to international.
Worlds?
Wow.
Universe. I don't know.
That'll require space travel.
Yeah, but they'll be going in, I know they're starting to do some of the organization right now, but I think it's in early May. Do you know, Mike, you look like.
I don't remember the details, I just know that what they did was awesome. I can't remember the specifics.
So we've had other teams, I think, go, and this is an older, I think it's all seniors that are going this time, so older kids.
Awesome.
It's in Kansas City in May 22nd.
Okay, so it's Labor Day.
And they'll be at the board meeting, the next board meeting.
Oh,
And
so
what's
we got it.
what's the name of the team?
Organized Mess.
Yeah, I love that, organized mess.
And the second team is Flip the Switch.
Yeah, those are good.
So we'll learn more next meeting.
Only one of them advanced,
Correct.
organized mess.
And other input, Ms. Contreras? Okay, over here.
If I could just put a plug in that the boys volleyball club season started today, and thank you again to the board for supporting that.
Do you have a personal interest in volleyball?
No.
You're sort of picking up on that.
I actually sit on the Boys Association State Board.
Love it.
Oh, on the state board. Good for you.
No major announcements. The website will be up and running tonight for the facilities task force.
Wonderful, thank you for that, because really appreciate that quick result. Matt?
This is not a committee report, it's just a preview. We have a meeting in early May for Personnel Committee, and where we will be talking about our year-end evaluation for about a half a year for our superintendent, and we may even include a temporary superintendent, assistant superintendent in that as well. So more to come on that, but that'll be a topic for future meetings.
Good, I appreciate that.
Okay, Christie?
Couple things. The Minnesota State High School League did their competitive assignment reassignment, selection reassignments here, I think a week or two ago. It doesn't impact Shakopee from what I understand, but there are some districts that are not happy campers, I guess. So there's been a lot in the news about that, but I just wanted to bring that up. And then
Go ahead and finish.
we have our first school board communications committee meeting coming up next Wednesday morning at 7:30. So I'm looking forward to kicking that off and bring your ideas.
Breakfast meeting, sort of?
I think Matt was bringing the breakfast.
Matt's still trying to arrange child transport to be able to attend.
I bet.
So somebody else could bring the food.
And then just the other thing I wanted to mention was I just learned yesterday when I was volunteering in Final Four that it is National Volunteer Week across the United States. So I just want to give a plug to all of our volunteers, community volunteers in our schools. I'm grateful that we have so many great volunteers because that's what makes our district wonderful. So thank you to all of us.
And Paul, you had a question?
Yeah, I did. Can you elaborate on this issue with the State High School League? I guess I haven't been watching the news a whole lot lately. I've been a little busy.
They just frequently review the competitive section assignments just to make sure there's balance. And when they did that, they kind of broke up some of the rivalries that some of the schools have had and shifted some things around to make it a little bit more even balanced. But I think I think there was a big article in the Star Tribune about it. If you look it up online, you probably get all the details of who moved where.
Okay.
We were not impacted.
Every 2 years, the Minnesota State High School League resets the competitive sections for athletics.
Okay.
Yep. Primarily based on size of schools, student enrollment, but there's a lot of factors, and some schools will opt up, some will try to, for a variety of reasons. They now have some reasons where you can opt down. If you've got, some schools have done it where they've had large populations of students who weren't participating traditionally, and they've been allowed waivers to opt down. It's written into their bylaws now, so.
Next one. No? Mike?
I really don't have anything. I feel like I talked enough
Yes.
already. So,
You've given all of your info.
Anybody celebrate a birthday recently? Happy birthday, Judy, a
Thank
couple
you.
days ago.
Yeah, thank you. A lot of family time, which is what I always want, so that's good. I personally don't believe in the birthday month, so
Yeah.
it's not over.
All right, I like it.
And at that, at only 6 minutes after 7, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Is there any way we can drag this out to annoy?
Filibusters are allowed.
To a what?
Any way we can drag this out to annoy Kristen?
Good, my bracket was busted when Duke lost, so.
Now, I think I heard over here a motion to adjourn.
Yes,
And I'll second that.
And Angela with the second. Well, that was really good.
The vote?
Vote on it.
Oh, I keep forgetting the vote part. I just think I've got that power, I guess. I don't know. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Away we go.
Nice.
Now slam it.
Yeah.
Now slam it.